Now that I'm reading the standout features of this new R6 Mark II, I came to the conclusion that most of this camera could have been a firmware update. And if you're already thinking it, I have no problem saying it. Let me prove it to you. So good to be seen, and it's even better to see what's going on. Welcome back to another video. In case we haven't met, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Francis. I happen to be a destination wedding photographer based out of sunny San Juan, Puerto Rico. I'm not going to lie to you. I woke up pretty excited about today because I knew that the launch of the R6 Mark II was supposed to take place today. And unfortunately, it was pretty underwhelming. As a R6 shooter myself, of which I have two bodies, recently had purchased the second body. I am, after seeing a lot of these videos, specifically the one from the Fro, he did a great job. Might want to link it down below. Pete did his own video, and a lot of these, fellow YouTubers did their own video who actually received the camera. I felt it's underwhelming, and I felt that most of the things that they offer in this body are now updatable through firmware. And I want to tackle each and every one of them, except for a couple, of course, because a couple of things did in fact change, but they are minuscule and important, at least for me. I don't know how you feel about what I'm about to talk. And if you want to banter back and forth and keep the conversation going, hey, by all means, hit me up in the comments and we will do just that. So I was thinking that we could start on the body and work our way in, if you will. There's a new dedicated on-off button. I do not feel that it was absolutely necessary. I felt that they were more, influenced from what Sony was doing by having the dedicated on-off switch. And hey, if that's something that you were clamoring about, by all means, kudos to you. You did it. You finally convinced Canon to do it. I prefer to have my on-off switch on one side of the camera and have perhaps everything else that I need to manipulate on the other half and not intertwine them. Additionally, in order for me to switch from photo to video, that literally took us, 2 seconds? And so by having a dedicated photo video switch, and I can see the benefit of that, but as you didn't wow me, Canon. It's not something that, So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the actual photo features. Now, I normally never ever shoot in burst modes because of the fact that I'm not shooting sports, I'm not shooting fast moving wildlife or, cars for that matter. And even as a wedding photographer that does in fact shoot many brides coming down the aisle, I don't feel as though I need to resort to burst shooting in order to capture her. I mean, single shot is more than enough. I'd rather just focus and recompose every single time as opposed to just like spray and pray, which is something that this camera does have in fact the ability to do. Now with double the frame rates, if you are in fact shooting in electronic mode. It also has raw burst mode, which is kind of cool, but again, it's sort of like a pigeonhole feature for those aforementioned people who shoot sports and surfing and birds and all that good stuff. It's just not me. I don't need that. Most of us watching this video do not need that. As far as the autofocusing is concerned, Jared actually said that when he had the R6 Mark II in his hands, he figured that the AI is now improved and it has a better ability to track the subject, whether that's a person or an object or even an animal. And so kudos to Canon for always improving that autofocus. And if this is in fact the case, and Jared, the Fro hit the nail on the head, then hey, more power to Canon. I think they have the best autofocusing features in the entire planet. So this one may be a little bit controversial, but apparently you now have the ability to shoot horses, trains, and airplanes. Now, how many of you out there, raise your hand, are equestrian shooters? That's what I thought. You can now shoot trains. I mean, is your name Sheldon Cooper? Like, are you a character from the Big Bang Theory with an obsession for trains? Like, who calls themselves a train shooter? Airplanes can apparently be tracked now. That reminds me of the Gary Allan song, Watching Airplanes. I mean, who sits there on top of the hood of their car and just shoots airplanes? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, 2% of us out there, if that. Another feature that is somewhat gimmicky is the fact that you now have the ability to let the camera or tell the camera which eye to focus on first. Now, I say that this is somewhat gimmicky because I think the camera will naturally focus on the eye that is closest to the lens, but in reality, I think Canon made this so that they can forget about that second eye that you never want to focus on. So it's a little give and take on that one. I like the fact that I don't have to worry about the other eye always, racking focus versus my camera. But again, at the end of the day, I think the camera is going to do what it does naturally and focus on the eye closest to the lens. Now, based on my notes, I am now finding out that the R6 Mark II is going to have a digital built-in teleconverter. Now, I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. Number one, do you own one? Chances are most of us don't. Number two, if you do own one, how many times have you placed it on a lens in order to digitally convert your images? Very rarely. So if your answers are no and rarely, then I'm going to go on a limb and say that you will never, ever use this feature either. Another feature worth mentioning is the fact that you can now capture moving HDR pictures with the new capabilities on the R6 Mark II. Now, personally, I don't even shoot still HDR images, so that's something that I guess the creatives, the actual Canon creators, if you will, like go crazy with it and experiment with stuff like that, which is, don't get me wrong, it's a cool feature to have, but at the end of the day, you have to sort of keep asking yourself, am I really going to use that? Is it worth my time to experiment, whereas I can use the other 98% of this camera to my advantage? I don't know about that. Moving on to video, the first thing I want to tackle is that the 4K right now is full width as opposed to having that slight crop in the Mark I version, if you will, of this camera. So that's actually very nice to have. On top of that, no more recording limit. Hallelujah. Thank you so much, Canon, for hearing our pleas. But also ask yourself, how many of you out there considering these cameras are going to be shooting more than a half hour, more than an hour at a time? If you're doing lengthy podcasts, I can see myself buying this. If you're doing lengthy interviews, I can also see myself buying this. But at the end of the day, do you really want to keep a camera on for more than a half hour at a time? 30-minute recording limit was never an issue for me. And honestly, it's not an issue for most of us anyway. It's good that it's gone. I hope they continue making limitless recording in all of the cameras. But at the end of the day, did you really, really need it? Be honest with yourself. Supposedly, on top of that, there is no overheating issue. I personally have never had overheating issues, and I shoot my fair share of weddings out in the boonies where it gets hot here in Puerto Rico. And truth be told, I've never had an issue with overheating, much less in the studio where it's a cool 72 degrees in here. So cool that it's not overheating. I hope it doesn't rear its ugly head later, but that's a very nice feature to have. Another feature that I found somewhat intriguing is the fact that you can now shoot 180 frames per second, but only at 1080p and with no audio. That is, it's completely baked in. I normally shoot everything at 4K 60, sometimes 1080, 120 is more than enough to me with audio, of course, in the R6. So would you really consider upping the ante to 180? Is it really necessary? Are you really going to use it? Is it going to be part of your editing workflow? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. Now, if you are the likes of Gerald Undone, who maximizes all the specs out there, you're going to be disappointed in the fact that you cannot shoot all eye on this camera. It still records at a compressed IPB rate, and it's very counterproductive in my opinion, because if you want to maximize the 6K downsample to 4K that this camera has offer, which is what I'm talking about next, you definitely wanted all-eye compression, and you're not going to be able to find that in your camera. Now, this may be an unpopular opinion, but 4K is pretty much what I think most of us out there ever really need. 4K, this video is being shot on 4K, and I mean, the image speaks for itself. It's nice, crisp, contrasty, and sharp. And if you're shooting anything above 4K, like 6K or 8K, I think that you are in the realm of the top 2% of creators who either are very meticulous about what they produce for a client, or we're talking about Hollywood style production cameras. I think that 4K is more than plenty for most of us. And I still think 1080 is king in 2023, going into 2023. So for you to say that you are giving me 6K downsampled into 4K, that's great. I mean, I'll take it. But at the end of the day, do you really need it? That sort of, to me, falls in line with, should I buy an R5 because it can do 8K? Like, be honest with yourself. How often are you gonna use 8K? It's gonna be a nightmare to edit. It's gonna take a toll on your computer. But in the R6 Mark II, it's downsampled into the 4K. You gotta ask yourself, is the 4K in your current R6 good enough? Or is this something that you wish to sell so that you can get this downsampled 6K into the 4K? Questions you have to ask yourself, and only you can answer. Another gimmicky feature about this camera is the fact that you can now tell the camera what to detect. So for example, if I were to shoot this video as a talking head on an R6 Mark II and tell it to never ever focus on the background, even if I leave the frame, it will give you a blurry background. In other words, it will focus on me once it detects that I am now back into the frame. How often would you be using that? Probably never. So that this video doesn't feel like I'm taking an absolute crap on this camera, there is a feature that I like, and it's the focus breathing computation. So let's say that you're a tenured veteran of video and you tend to rack focus manually back and forth all day, every day. This is definitely going to be something that you look forward to, because it's going to have little to no focus breathing when it comes to focus pulling front to back, side to side, whatever it is that you feel like doing with this camera. So that's cool. I'll take that every day. And last but not least, this camera is featuring false color as well as zebra lines. Now, those are two things that I have never used. I don't have any inclination to use them, whether it's photo or video. But in the event that you find a niche area where you feel as though it's adamant that you always use it, you now have it. Again, this could have been done via a firmware update. So there you have it. Those are my talking points and my sort of case for making this a huge firmware update that it could have been, as instead of putting together a brand new body. It's worth mentioning that it does have a new sensor. Allegedly, it's not the same one found in the R3, but an all new sensor with 4.1 more megapixels. Is that a game changer for you? Is 4 megapixels going to make a huge difference in your photos? I don't think so. If you were to put two pictures side by side and give it to 10 different people, 9 of them would probably get it wrong. 4 megapixels is not going to be a deal breaker for me. And at the end of the day, I think I am in fact keeping both of my R6s, especially when I just got my second body. So who is this camera really for? I think my theory is two people: high frame rate shooters like sports and wildlife and stuff like that, as well as those video shooters who have a finer eye for details like sharpness and contrast, who definitely don't want to dish out the money for something like an R5. Also worth mentioning that if you're coming from an RP or even an R and you've been marinating the idea of jumping ship to something a little bit more quality, then this is definitely the camera for you, and I recommend you go for the R6 Mark II. If you're an R6 shooter like myself, I think that you should stand pat and wear out the R6 as much as you can for the next best thing, and I do not think that you should upgrade. But anyway, those are my thoughts. I just wanted to hop on board here on November 2nd and launch this video as well for your viewing pleasure. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I would love to get to know you guys. So let me know in the comments what you think of this camera, and I will start doing the whole potato jet thing and reading some comments at the end of every single video. So there you have it. You will get a shout out on this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was a little valuable for you and it helped you make a decision on whether or not you're gonna pull the trigger. If you did get some value, stick that thumb you know where, and if you want to see more videos like this one, stick around. I would love to have you. My name is Francis, and I'll see you guys in the next video.